Welcome to Life Stories. In today's story, we follow the journey of a man who has spent 18 long years searching for his daughter, Grace, who mysteriously disappeared when she was just 7 years old. After years of grief and unanswered questions, a chance encounter in a jewelry store brings him face to face with a young woman who may hold the key to the past he's been desperately seeking. This is a story of loss, hope, and the search for truth. Join us as we uncover a journey that will change everything. Subscribe to our channel to begin today's story. I still remember the day when everything changed for me, when my world was shattered in a way that no one could have prepared me for. The day my daughter, Grace, disappeared. It feels like a lifetime ago. But the pain is still there, lodged deep in my chest like an old wound that never healed. The years have gone by, but the loss, that feeling of emptiness, remains constant. I had been a successful man, perhaps too consumed by my work, my empire, but nothing, not the wealth, not the power, could ever fill the void left by Grace. She was 7 years old when she vanished without a trace. And I couldn't accept it. I couldn't let go. I spent every penny I had, hired the best private investigators, made countless appeals, and yet every road I followed led to a dead end. For years, I searched, hoping against hope that one day, someone would knock on my door with the news that she had been found. But that day never came. After Grace's disappearance, I retreated into myself, trying to push the pain away, trying to distract myself. I remarried Kate, a woman who had a kind heart and a beautiful smile. She made me feel alive again, at least for a while. But even her presence couldn't heal the wound. The question of where Grace was always hung over us, a shadow that neither of us could escape. In the beginning, Kate tried to comfort me, but over time, even she couldn't understand the weight I carried. How could she? How could anyone who hadn't experienced the loss of a child understand the depth of the grief that consumed me? It wasn't just the absence of Grace that hurt, it was the silence. The sound of her laughter, the pitter-patter of her little feet running through the house, was gone. Instead, there was only silence, deep and oppressive. I missed everything about her. The way she would ask me a million questions. The way her eyes would light up when she was excited about something. I missed her so much that I could feel the ache in every bone of my body. I would often find myself standing outside her room, staring at the door I hadn't opened in years. The dust on the floor, the faded wallpaper, her stuffed animal sitting neatly on the bed. It was all just as she left it. Her books stacked on her desk, as if she might return one day to finish her homework. It was a foolish hope. I knew that, but I couldn't let it go. Not yet. I had tried to be strong. For Grace, for Kate, for the world around me. But how could I be strong when a part of me had died the day Grace disappeared? How could I go on pretending that everything was okay when I was consumed by the pain of her absence? I looked around at the life I had built, at the mansion that was so empty without her, and I wondered what it all meant. What was the point of all the success if I couldn't have my daughter by my side? Kate and I tried to move forward, but we couldn't. The love between us had changed, transformed into something distant. We still cared for each other, but the spark that had once brought us together had faded. The more I searched for Grace, the more the distance between Kate and I grew. I couldn't shake the feeling that the loss of Grace was slowly tearing us apart. And nothing I did could fix it. It wasn't just the grief that caused the rift between us. It was the constant, unspoken question. Where was Grace? Why couldn't we find her? And the more time passed, the harder it became for Kate to understand the depth of my pain. She tried. She really did. But there were moments when I could see the confusion in her eyes. The frustration that came from not knowing how to help me. I couldn't blame her. How could anyone understand what I was going through? How could anyone understand the longing I felt? The desperate hope that someday, somehow, I would find Grace again? But life had a way of moving forward, even when you weren't ready. And so, I did my best to keep going. I buried myself in my work, in my business, in the endless demands of the world I had created. I had to numb the pain somehow. I had to keep my mind occupied, even if it meant losing myself in the process. It was easier that way. Easier than facing the emptiness, the grief, the constant reminder that Grace was gone. And then Kate suggested we go shopping. It was her birthday, and she thought it might be a small distraction from the grief that always lingered between us. We headed to New York City, a place Kate loved for its excitement, its energy, its endless possibilities. I didn't have the same enthusiasm for it, but I went along with it. For her, I told myself that I would surprise her with something special, something beautiful, perhaps a piece of jewelry, something to make her smile, something to show her that I still cared. As we walked through the bustling streets of Fifth Avenue, my mind was elsewhere. It was hard to focus on anything when my heart was still consumed by the question of where Grace was. What had happened to her? But Kate was excited, flitting in and out of stores, trying on dresses and shoes. I followed her, my thoughts still trapped in the past, still searching for Grace in the crowds of strangers that surrounded me. It was in a jewelry store that everything changed again. Kate was eyeing a set of diamond earrings when I saw her. The saleswoman, young and kind, helping another customer, and around her neck was a pendant that took my breath away. The exact same pendant I had given to Grace. The pendant with the tiny emerald stone set in the center. The pendant that Grace had loved so much before she vanished. My heart skipped a beat, and everything around me seemed to slow down. Could it really be? Could this woman be Grace? I couldn't breathe. For a moment, everything else faded away. The crowded streets of New York, the noise of the bustling city, the soft hum of conversation around me, it all disappeared. All that existed in that moment was the pendant. It gleamed under the soft light of the jewelry store, almost mocking me with its familiarity. There it was, hanging from the saleswoman's neck. A perfect replica of the pendant I had given Grace all those years ago. I was frozen, my eyes locked on the delicate chain. Unable to look away, my heart raced in my chest as emotions I hadn't felt in years came rushing back. The memories of Grace, of the day I placed that pendant around her neck, came flooding in. I could still hear her laugh. The way she smiled so brightly. Her small fingers reaching up to touch the cool metal. She had been so happy, so full of life. And then, just days later, she was gone. Gone without a trace, without a word, without any sign of what happened to her. I must have stood there for longer than I realized, because Kate's voice broke through my thoughts, sharp with a hint of irritation. John, what do you think of these? She was holding up a pair of earrings, but I barely registered her words. My gaze was still fixed on the saleswoman. My mind was spinning. How could this be happening? What were the chances? It had to be a coincidence, right? There were thousands of pendants like that out there. But no, there was something about the way it shimmered, the way it seemed to call out to me, that made me believe there was more to this than just chance. I'll be right back, I muttered, my voice shaky. I didn't even wait for Kate to respond. I was already walking toward the counter, the sound of my footsteps muffled by the plush carpet beneath my feet. I didn't know what I was going to say, or how I was going to ask, but I had to know. I had to find out if this was the same pendant. I had to find out if this woman, this young saleswoman, was somehow connected to Grace. The saleswoman was finishing up with another customer when I reached the counter. She smiled politely at me as she turned her attention to me. Her face was soft, unassuming, but there was something about her that seemed familiar. I couldn't place it at first. Was it her eyes? Her jawline? My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to find the words. That necklace, I said, my voice trembling. Where did you get it? She glanced down at the pendant, her fingers instinctively brushing over the emerald stone. Oh, this? She asked, her voice calm and collected. It was a gift from my mother. She gave it to me when I was little. My breath caught in my throat. Her mother. I was trying to steady myself, trying to keep my composure. But it was impossible. The flood of emotions, the memories, the hope, it was all too much. I couldn't let this slip away. I needed to know. Your mother, I repeated, my voice faltering. Where did she get it? The saleswoman smiled softly, but there was a flicker of confusion in her eyes. I don't really know, she said. It's the only thing I have left from her. She passed away when I was young. I've always worn it. It's special. I tried to steady my breath, but it was as if the world was spinning around me. This was too much. Could it be? Could this woman be Grace? Could she be my daughter? Lost all these years, wearing the same pendant I had given her? I had to know more. But how could I ask? How could I even begin to explain what I was feeling? The questions were pouring in, faster than I could process them. What's your name? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked at me, surprised, but she answered politely, Lily, Lily Walker. Lily, not Grace. The name hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt a wave of hope wash over me, only to be quickly followed by a crushing sense of disappointment. Lily Walker, not Grace. But names could change. People could be given new identities. Could this be her? Could this woman standing before me really be the daughter I had lost so many years ago? I was standing there, lost in the whirlwind of emotions that had been unleashed by that one simple pendant. The woman in front of me, Lily, looked at me curiously, as if sensing the weight of the questions I was carrying. But before I could ask anything else, Kate appeared beside me, her voice breaking the tension. What's going on? She asked, her eyes flicking between me and Lily. Did you find something you like? I barely registered her words. My mind was still reeling from the encounter. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was so close to the truth. But I needed more. I needed answers. I needed to know if Lily was really my daughter. I needed to know why she had that pendant. Why it felt like my Grace was standing right in front of me. But with no memory of the life I had lost. Do you work here every day? I asked Lily, trying to sound casual. I had to keep talking. Keep gathering information, just in case I want to come back for the necklace. She nodded, still looking at me with a hint of confusion in her eyes. Yeah, I'm here most days. I smiled, though I could feel the tension building inside me. There was no going back now. I had to find out who she was. I had to know the truth. I turned to Kate, my mind racing. We'll be back, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was anything but. Kate seemed puzzled, but I could see the concern in her eyes. She didn't understand, but how could she? How could anyone understand the weight of what I was feeling? As we left the store, my thoughts were consumed by Lily, by the pendant, by the possibility that my daughter might be standing right in front of me. It couldn't be a coincidence. It just couldn't be. The drive back to the hotel felt like a blur, a disjointed haze of thoughts and emotions that I couldn't quite grasp. Kate chatted about the jewelry store, about the earrings she'd tried on, but I barely heard her. My mind was still consumed with the encounter at the store, still caught in the whirlwind of possibility. Could Lily really be Grace? Could she be the daughter I had spent nearly 2 decades searching for? Only to find her standing right there in front of me, without even realizing it? I couldn't let go of the way her fingers had instinctively touched the pendant. It was like she knew it was special, like it had some meaning to her, even though she had no memory of where it came from. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that this was the moment I had been waiting for. That I had finally found Grace. But there was so much uncertainty. There was too much that didn't make sense. Lily had said the pendant was from her mother. But her mother wasn't the one who had given it to her. I had given it to Grace. That was the part one couldn't shake. What were the chances of Lily wearing the same pendant? A pendant I had placed around my daughter's neck years ago. Just before she disappeared? I had spent years searching, going through every lead, every possibility, but nothing had ever panned out. And now, here I was, facing a young woman who seemed to be connected to Grace in ways I couldn't explain. I felt a deep longing in my chest. It was as though I was standing on the edge of something huge. Something that could either shatter me completely or heal the wound that had festered inside me for so long. But I couldn't be sure. I needed answers. I needed to know if this was the moment I had been waiting for or if I was simply chasing an illusion. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the hotel room, my mind racing with questions. I kept thinking back to that moment in the jewelry store, when Lily had looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. She hadn't recognized me. She hadn't remembered me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this story. Something that connected her to me in ways I couldn't yet understand. The next morning, I called the private investigator I had worked with over the years. Paul Mitchell. He had been a constant presence in my search for Grace. The one person who had never given up on finding her. I needed him now more than ever. I needed answers, and I couldn't do it alone. Paul, it's John, I said when he picked up the phone. My voice was tight with emotion. I need your help again. I think I've found someone. I think I've found Grace. There was a pause on the other end of the line. John, we've been through this before. You've followed every lead. You've spent years searching. I know you want to believe this. But you need to be careful. I know, I interrupted, my voice shaking. But this is different. I saw her, Paul. I saw a woman named Lily Walker, and she's wearing the pendant. The one I gave Grace. It's the same one. There was silence on the other end of the line. And then Paul spoke softly. I'll look into it, John. I'll see what I can find. But you need to be prepared for anything. I hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of hope and dread. What if Paul couldn't find anything? What if Lily wasn't Grace, and I had let myself believe in something that wasn't real? The thought made my stomach turn. But I had to know. I couldn't let it go. Not after everything I had been through. The rest of the day passed in a haze of uncertainty. Kate could tell something was wrong. But I didn't know how to explain it to her. She hadn't seen what I had seen. She didn't understand the connection I felt. The way the pendant had triggered memories that I had buried deep inside. She didn't know what it was like to carry the weight of a loss so great that it consumed every part of you. I tried to focus on the present. On the things that mattered. But my thoughts kept drifting back to Lily. Back to the pendant. Back to the possibility that I had found Grace at last. That evening, I couldn't wait any longer. I called Paul again, my fingers trembling as I dialed his number. He answered quickly, his voice calm but serious. John, he said, I've found something. My heart skipped a beat. What did you find? There's a woman named Lily Walker who was found abandoned at 7 years old. Just outside a small town upstate. Paul explained. No one knew where she came from. No missing persons reports matched her description. The couple who found her ended up adopting her, giving her a new name. Her birth parents were never found. I sat down, my legs feeling weak. My mind was racing. It couldn't be. It couldn't be Grace. But the details lined up. The age, the timeline, the lack of a past. Could this really be my daughter? Lost and forgotten, only to be found again? Send me the photo, I said, my voice barely a whisper. A few moments later, my phone buzzed, and I opened the message. I stared at the photo in shock. It was Lily, but it was also Grace. There was no doubt in my mind. The girl I had been searching for all these years was standing before me. I sat there, staring at the photo on my phone, trying to process the impossible reality in front of me. There she was, Lily Walker. The woman I had just met. The woman I had questioned about the pendant. But in that photo, I saw Grace. It was undeniable. The same eyes, the same smile, the same soft features. She was my daughter. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Each beat louder than the last. As if trying to break free from the weight of the years. The grief, and the unrelenting search for Grace. But even as the truth hit me, I couldn't feel the relief I had imagined. Instead, I was consumed by a whirlwind of emotions, joy, fear, disbelief. How had this happened? How had I not known? I ran my fingers through my hair, struggling to find the right words to explain this moment to Kate. How could I explain what I had just learned? How could I tell her that the woman we had just met, the saleswoman at the jewelry store, might be the daughter I had lost all those years ago? Kate was already getting ready for bed when I walked into our hotel room. Her expression tired but warm. She looked up as I entered, her eyes scanning my face. She could sense that something was different. She could see it in the way I held myself. The way I stood there, holding my phone like it might slip from my fingers at any moment. What's going on? She asked. Her voice soft, cautious. I need to talk to you, I said, trying to steady my breath. I've found something. Or rather, someone. Kate furrowed her brow. Her curiosity piqued. What do you mean? I swallowed hard, struggling to find the words. Kate, I think I've found Grace. Her face went pale, and for a long moment, she didn't say anything. Her eyes darted between me and the phone in my hand, as if trying to understand what I was saying. Grace? What do you mean? I showed her the photo. This is Lily Walker, The woman we met in the store today. But look at her. Look at the picture. It's Grace. It's my daughter. Kate's mouth went dry. She took the phone from my hand, studying the image, her face filled with disbelief. John, are you sure? I mean, how can this be possible? We've searched for years. How could we have missed her all this time? I shook my head. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. It's her. It's Grace. There was a long silence between us. The weight of the moment hanging in the air. Kate's eyes filled with doubt. And I could see the confusion and fear in her gaze. She was trying to process what I was telling her. But there were too many questions. Too many pieces of the puzzle that didn't fit. How could she have been hidden for so long? Kate finally whispered. How could she not know? How could she be living a whole life? And we never knew? The questions echoed in my mind. How had this happened? Why hadn't anyone told me? Why hadn't Lily, or rather Grace, come to me all these years? I felt a deep ache in my chest. The joy of finding her was slowly being overshadowed by the haunting realization that I had lost so much time. I don't know, I said, my voice breaking, but I'm going to find out. I have to. I've waited too long for this. I paced the room, trying to think, trying to make sense of everything. How could Grace have been so close? Living under a different name. In a different life. And I had never known? How could she have grown up without me? And then there was the matter of Kate. The woman who had stood by me for all these years. The one who had supported me through the pain of Grace's disappearance. But what if she didn't understand? What if she felt like she had been living in the shadow of a ghost? A child that I could never forget? I turned to Kate, my heart heavy. We need to go back. We need to talk to Lily. I need to know more. I have to know if she's really Grace. Kate nodded, though her expression was strained. I understand. But John, you need to be careful. There's a lot we don't know. I know, I said, my voice firm, but I can't let this slip away. I've spent too many years wondering. Too many years in pain. To turn away now. I need to know the truth. We didn't speak much after that. The room was filled with a silence that was as heavy as the weight of the years I had spent searching. Kate was still processing the news. Still trying to come to terms with what I had told her. And I was lost in a sea of emotions, grief, joy, disbelief, and the uncertainty of what would happen next. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't going to stop. I couldn't stop. The truth was finally within reach. And I was going to find it. The next morning, I could barely focus. My thoughts were racing, tangled in a chaotic mess of questions, doubts, and hopes. I kept replaying the moment at the jewelry store over and over in my mind. The way Lily had touched the pendant so instinctively. The way it had felt like a connection to the past that I couldn't ignore. And yet, there was still so much I didn't understand. Was Lily really Grace? How could she not remember me? How could she have spent all these years unaware of her true identity? I knew I had to act quickly. Every moment felt like an eternity. And I couldn't let this slip away. I had to see Lily again. I had to hear from her directly. Find out everything I could about her life. About what had happened to her after she disappeared. Kate, still processing the shock of everything, agreed to accompany me back to the store. She wasn't thrilled, her skepticism still clouding her thoughts. But I could see the concern in her eyes. I knew this was hard for her. After all, I had been obsessing over Grace for years. And now she was confronted with the possibility that this young woman might actually be the daughter I had lost. It was a lot to take in. Especially after all the time we had spent together. Trying to move forward. When we arrived at the store, I could feel my pulse quickening. It was like walking into a dream. A place where my past and present collided. The moment I stepped through the door, I could feel the weight of it all, the years of searching. The hope, the grief, the disbelief. And then there was Lily, standing behind the counter again, her face calm and friendly, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed, for me, at least. For her, I didn't know. I hesitated for a moment, gathering my courage. This wasn't just another conversation. This wasn't just small talk about jewelry. This was the moment I had been waiting for. No. The moment I had been searching for my entire life. Lily, I said, my voice shaky but firm. Can we talk? It's important. She looked up, a faint look of curiosity crossing her face. Sure, she said, putting down the piece of jewelry she was working with. What's on your mind? I motioned for Kate to stand back. This was something I needed to do on my own. I need to ask you something. I began, trying to steady myself. I know this might sound strange, but I need you to hear me out. When you told me that pendant was a gift from your mother, I need to know more. I gave that pendant to my daughter. A long time ago, before she disappeared. Lily blinked in confusion, her expression uncertain. I don't understand. You gave me this pendant? I nodded, my heart heavy. No, not you. My daughter. Her name was Grace. She disappeared when she was 7. And I've spent the last 18 years looking for her. She stepped back slightly, her hand instinctively brushing over the pendant again. I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. I'm not your daughter. My name is Lily. I don't know who Grace is. I could see the unease in her eyes. The confusion. But there was something else there too. A flicker of recognition that I couldn't ignore. I pressed on, my voice tight with emotion. Lily, listen to me. I don't expect you to remember anything. But I think you've been hidden from me for years. Your real name is Grace. Isn't it? Her eyes widened, and I could see her pulse quicken. No, she whispered, shaking her head. My name is Lily. I've always been Lily. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was the moment of truth. And yet, I was still filled with doubt. I wanted so badly for this to be real. I wanted to believe that the years of grief and searching were finally coming to an end. But what if I was wrong? What if this was all just a mistake? I know it's hard to understand, I said gently, but I've been searching for you for so long. I've hired private investigators. I've searched everywhere. I know it sounds insane. But the pendant, your pendant, it's the same one I gave my daughter before she disappeared. I've spent all these years looking for her. And now I've found you. She looked at me with wide eyes, as if trying to process everything I was saying. And for a moment, it felt like the world was on the verge of shifting beneath us. There was a brief silence, a quiet that hung heavy in the air. Then, Lily spoke, her voice trembling. I don't know what to think. She said quietly, I don't remember anything about my past. I don't know who I am anymore. My heart broke at her words. I couldn't imagine what she was going through. What it must have felt like to hear this stranger, this man who claimed to be her father, tell her that the life she had known wasn't the truth. I reached out gently, placing my hand on hers. You don't have to remember everything right now, I said softly, but I promise you, we'll figure this out, together. She looked at me, her eyes filled with fear and confusion. But there was something else there too. Something I hadn't seen before, hope. Maybe just a flicker, but it was enough. It was enough for me to believe that this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I stood there, holding her hand, knowing that the path ahead would be difficult. But for the first time in 18 years, I had a glimmer of hope. Maybe this wasn't just a story of loss. Maybe it was a story of finding something that was never truly gone. The silence between Lily and I stretched on, thick with the weight of what had just been said. I had poured my heart out to her, told her that I believed, with every fiber of my being, that she was my daughter. But the reality of what I was asking her to accept seemed to hang in the air like a thick fog. She didn't know me. She didn't remember me. She didn't even remember her real name. Her confusion mirrored my own inner turmoil. The years of searching, the unanswered questions, the moments of doubt. I had spent so long wondering if I would ever find Grace, and now that I had, it felt almost too surreal to believe. I watched as Lily's fingers traced the pendant again. Her expression troubled, lost. I don't know how to process this, she said quietly, her voice trembling. She looked up at me, her gaze uncertain, as if searching for some reassurance that she couldn't quite find. I could see the fear in her eyes. I could see how torn she was. How the reality of her past being a lie was too much to handle in one go. She had spent her life believing one thing. And now here I was, telling her that everything she had known was wrong. How could she possibly process that all at once? I understand, I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. I can't imagine how overwhelming this must be for you. I never meant to put you through this. But I have to know if you're my daughter. I have to know if you're Grace. Her hands trembled as she pulled back slightly, her eyes searching mine for some sign that this wasn't a cruel joke. I could see the walls she had built around herself starting to crack. She didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to accept it. And who could blame her? To suddenly be told that your entire life had been a lie, it was enough to break anyone. I'm sorry, I don't know what you want from me, Lily said, her voice barely a whisper. I don't remember anything from before I was adopted. I don't know who I am. How could you be sure? I know this is hard, I said, struggling to keep my composure. But there's no doubt in my mind. You're wearing the same pendant that I gave to Grace before she disappeared. You look like her, and I've spent years searching for you. I never gave up, and now I'm here, telling you the truth, and all I want is for you to believe me. Lily looked away for a moment, as if she needed to gather herself. She was holding it together. Just barely. I could see her trying to push back the flood of emotions that were threatening to overwhelm her. And I couldn't blame her. It was a lot to ask of someone who had no memory of the life they had lost. I don't know what to say, Lily said quietly, her voice breaking. You're telling me I'm someone else. But I don't feel like that person. I don't feel like Grace. I nodded, my heart aching for her. I know this is difficult. But you are Grace, and you have a family who has been waiting for you all this time. I've been waiting for you. And I'm not going anywhere. I stepped closer to her, gently reaching out to touch her arm. She stiffened at first, but then, slowly, she turned her gaze back to me. I saw something in her eyes, something fragile, something uncertain, but it was also the faintest glimmer of hope. I don't know if I can just accept this, she said, her voice quiet. I don't know if I can just be someone else overnight. I took a deep breath, the pain in my chest intensifying. You don't have to. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you are. And I'm here for you. Every step of the way. There was a long pause. And for a moment, I thought she might turn away. That she might close herself off completely. But then, to my surprise, she nodded. I need time, Lily said, her voice soft but firm. I need time to figure this out. But I'll try to understand. That was all I could ask for. I had found Grace, if only in name, and now it was time to rebuild what had been broken. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be moments of confusion, of doubt, of pain. But it would also be a journey of healing, of rediscovery, and of rebuilding the bond that had been lost. We have all the time in the world, I said, offering her a soft smile. We'll take it one step at a time. As I stood there, looking at Lily, the overwhelming sense of loss that had consumed me for so long began to shift. It wasn't gone, not entirely, but there was something new now, a spark of hope. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something good. Something worth fighting for. As the days passed, Lily and I began to build something new together. It wasn't easy. There were times when the weight of the past hung heavily between us. When the memories she couldn't recall seemed like a distant, unreachable part of her. But with every conversation, every shared moment, we slowly started to bridge the gap between who she was and who she had been. She began to open up, little by little, allowing me into her world. Even as she struggled with her identity, we visited places from her childhood. The park where we had once played. The house where she had been born. I told her stories about her mother. How much she had been loved. How excited we were when we found out we were going to have a daughter. We spoke about the life she had lost and the life she was now discovering. Lily's confusion never truly disappeared. But she began to accept the truth. She began to see me not as a stranger but as the father who had never stopped searching for her. And with each passing day, I saw glimpses of the little girl I had once known, the Grace I had loved so deeply. As for Kate, the silence between us was heavy. But we made the decision to part ways. It wasn't an easy choice. But it was the right one. The betrayal had cut too deep. I needed to focus on rebuilding my relationship with Lily. On making up for the lost time. Life had a way of moving forward. Even when you weren't ready. But with Lily by my side, I knew I was ready for the future. Together, we would create new memories. new moments to cherish, and for the first time in many years, I could finally say I was at peace. Thank you for following this life story. Subscribe to our channel to stay updated with new videos and more heartwarming journeys.